I told my friends that not only monotheism and polytheism, but the very starting point, the use of the word religion itself is not valid for understanding or making an attempt to understand Hinduism. Hinduism cannot be seen and understood in its entirety as a religion, certainly not as a religion in the Abrahamic sense of the term. It can only be understood properly when we utilize the term and the context of dharma. We call Hinduism Hindu dharma or Sanatana dharma. Therefore, the terms and frameworks that have been created and used by the Abrahamic traditions, they simply cannot be used towards understanding Hinduism. The word religion is not a translation of the word dharma, and the idea of religion, even in its most liberal and Catholic sense, cannot adequately capture the concept of dharma, which is a multi-level and multi-dimensional concept. Dharma is fundamental not only to Hinduism but also to other spiritual traditions born on the Indian soil, such as Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. Hindu dharma or Sanatana dharma cannot be translated as Hindu religion. Similarly, Bauddha dharma is not Buddhist religion. Jaina dharma is not Jaina religion, and Sikh dharma is also not Sikh religion. To explain some basic differences, I stated that unlike the Abrahamic traditions, the dharmic traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism, have fostered a culture of dialogue, debate, and open discourse where all topics are subject to debate and inquiry. True spirituality, according to these traditions, is regarded as an inner science and a pathway to higher knowledge and higher consciousness rather than just a blind faith that is immune to any rational or scientific questioning. The ultimate objective is not merely to adhere to a set of beliefs or to secure a place in some heaven beyond, but to attain inner realization and a profound understanding of the relationship between man and the cosmos. The Dharma traditions emphasize the cultivation of a cosmic vision and consciousness. The goals, aspirations, and practices of Dharma traditions are categorically and fundamentally different from the Abrahamic traditions. Religion is not the translation of Dharma, and therefore to talk about Hinduism as a religion is incorrect. In fact, I told them that even the use of the word Hinduism is erroneous. Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism are not isms, and they are certainly not isms like capitalism, communism, liberalism, socialism, and whatnot. To call Bauddha Dharma Buddhism or Jaina Dharma Jainism is like calling Christianity Jesusism or Islam Muhammadanism, maybe even worse. Sanatana Dharma, Bauddha Dharma, Jaina Dharma, and Sikh Dharma cannot be narrowed down and caged in terms of religion or ism. They are dharma traditions rooted in dharma consciousness, and that is how they need to be approached, to be understood and studied if one seeks really authentic understanding. So I told them that we are faced with a multifold problem here. All of these key terms and concepts used in the question, monotheism, polytheism, religion, and ism, which seem so innocent, are actually invalid terms. Besides, I said, they are so heavily loaded terms as well. They have been and they continue to be utilized as theological warheads pointed towards the Dharma traditions. Any attempt to understand Hinduism using categories and frameworks such as these most likely will not lead to an authentic understanding of Hinduism. Worse, it may create unfortunate misunderstandings, and worse still, situations of social, political, and military conflicts, which no person in his right mind would want in this era that we are living in today. This is an age of all. We want peace and progress for all. Every single person on the planet belonging to any nation, any religion, any ethnicity, any age must have the opportunity and the means to live a life free from suffering, a life of happiness, a life of good health and noble thoughts. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani paschyantu ma kaschid dukh bhag bhavet. May all be happy, may all be healthy, may all see the good, and may no one suffer. This has been an aspiration of the Hindu culture since antiquity. Never has the realization of this aspiration seemed more important and more possible with all the technology, material wealth, and the explosion of knowledge that is available to us as humanity today. That is the urgent demand we need to address. Achieving the well-being of all of us, for all of us, by all of us. But the all of us can only happen when we understand, appreciate, and respect each other, when we create healing power through our similarities and delightful richness through our differences. Without the fulfillment of that condition, all our noble ideals, I said, would end up being a vain chimera. So I said, what has been referred to as Hinduism can only be understood properly when we use the name Sanatana Dharma, its original Sanskrit name, or Hindu Dharma, the name adopted during the course of its long march in history. It is essential to use the terms and categories that have been created, used, and refined over centuries by the dharmic traditions to understand, debate, and deliberate and dialogue on the meaning of things and the nature of truth and the ultimate reality. I then asked my friends present there, how many of you have heard the term Sanatan Dharma? Not one hand went up among this group of my friends, who were all well educated, and so many of them had traveled around the world. I then said to them that for anyone who is genuinely interested, this talk so far should be a pointer enough towards the need to understand the Hindu traditions in terms of their own terminology, in their own right, and not as a subset of the conceptual framework of the Abrahamic traditions or the Western theological scholarship. Hindu Dharma and the other dharmas belong to a unique and profound spiritual, religious, philosophical, scientific, artistic, and cultural tradition that has had as one of its principal aims the pursuit of the many dimensions of higher consciousness and the realization of the individual, the cosmic, the universal, and the transcendental self in as many different ways as possible. This pursuit has been relentless throughout Hindu history, and it has not ended. Both the quest and realizations continue to expand and evolve ever so richly and variously. So I stated that the first major problem with the question is the use of invalid terms, concepts, categories, and frameworks. The second major problem with the question, I said, is regarding the assumptions that are hidden deeply and inseparably rooted in the question. The question seeks to know whether Hindus believe in one God or many, whether we are monotheists or polytheists. The assumption in the question, which may be visible to many now, is that these beliefs are mutually exclusive. You can either believe in one God or you can believe in many gods, and you cannot believe in both. The assumption is that monotheism and polytheism are mutually exclusive. On closer scrutiny, I said, this assumption may not hold true in all cases. An either-or relationship may not be the only kind of relationship that is possible between monotheism and polytheism. Yes, an either-or relationship is one kind of relationship that is possible. Monotheism and polytheism can be mutually exclusive, but they can also have other types of relationships. They can, for instance, have an and relationship, monotheism and polytheism. They can go together hand in hand, and they can go together with varying degrees of focus or weight on either side. In addition to that, they can also have a hierarchical relationship where one of them is considered higher and the other lower. These are just two other possibilities. There can be more, such as having a complementary relationship where they complement each other, or a symbiotic relationship where they depend on each other for coherence and meaning. The point is, I told my friends, that monotheism and polytheism need not always cancel each other out, whereas the question cancels them out by asking whether we believe in monotheism or polytheism. This makes the question itself incorrect, or at least it makes it imprecise, because maybe Hindus believe in both. And then I added that it is not just this one assumption that is problematic. The question hides several problematic assumptions. When it asks if Hindus are monotheists or polytheists, it also assumes that there is one homogeneous kind of monotheism and that monotheism is only of one kind. That is not true. Monotheism is of several kinds. Similarly, the question also assumes that polytheism is also only of one kind. That's also not true. There are many kinds of polytheisms. The question, and this is very important, seems to assume further that there are just these two kinds of theisms, monotheism and polytheism. That's not true either. Theism, that is, the belief in the existence of a supernatural deity, are of different kinds. There are several kinds of theism in addition to monotheism and polytheism, such as pantheism, panentheism, which are significantly different from monotheism and polytheism. Another highly erroneous assumption that the question has is it assumes that, like the Abrahamic traditions, Hinduism also follows just one belief system, either monotheistic or polytheistic. No, it doesn't. And belief, while it's a part of the Hindu tradition, is not the central element in it, as it is in the Abrahamic traditions. To be a believer is not an end in itself in the Hindu tradition or the Buddhist and other Indian traditions for that matter. Belief at the most for us is like a finger pointing to the moon. If we aspire to go to the moon, we have to understand that the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon itself. The finger merely directs our gaze towards the moon. If we mistake the finger for the moon, we will hold on to the finger and will perhaps never be able to reach and see and know the real moon. I told them further that in addition to these several erroneous assumptions that the question innocently hides when it asks whether we believe in one God or many gods, it also assumes that the term God is a universally applicable concept that means the same thing to all people of all religions and traditions. No, it doesn't. So a seemingly innocent and simple question has such layers and layers of hidden assumptions, and those in the context of Hinduism do not hold at all. This, therefore, makes the question itself erroneous, wrong. A friend at this point interjected and said, before you go to answer the question further, please clarify this last statement more. She asked, Hindus don't refer to God as God? I replied that we do use the word God in our conversations, especially when we speak in English. But in our tradition, in different Indian languages, we don't use the word God to refer to the divine. We use terms like Bhagavan, Ishvara, Deva, Devi, Devata, Brahma, Paramatma, Purusha, Prakriti, Purushottama, and several others. These terms are technical terms. Each one of these has a specific and keenly defined meaning within the Hindu philosophical and spiritual discourse. And the meaning of these terms are different not only from the term God, but even among themselves. Ishvara, for instance, has a meaning that is different than that of Bhagavan or Purushottama or Brahma. In the context of Bauddha Dharma, for instance, Bodhicitta, or roughly the Buddha mind, can simply not be equated with the term God in the monotheistic sense. Similarly, while referring to our spiritual heroes, we don't use the terms prophet, messiah, etc. We respect these terms in their own unique contexts and in the context of the religions or traditions in which they are used. We even celebrate them in our common discourse. Occasionally, we may even use them as epithets, but they don't hold much significance in our tradition. We use terms such as rishi, muni, tapasvi, jnani, yogi, tantric, aghori, vibhuti, brahmana, sadhu, purohit, sant, guru, pandit, acharya, arya, arhat, vipra, buddha, bodhisattva, anshavatar, avatar, and so on. It is technically incorrect to use the terms messiah or prophet when referring to a rishi, a bodhisattva, a buddha, or an avatar. Each one of these categories has a clearly defined and organized meaning in the larger framework of Indian spirituality, and each one has further subcategories even. For instance, take the term rishi. We have different categories of rishis. Shrota Rishi, Kanda Rishi, Maharishi, Raja Rishi, Brahma Rishi, Deva Rishi, and others. Each is classified specifically according to the standards of spiritual conduct and realization within the Indian or Bharatiya tradition. Similarly, take the example of yogis. There are different kinds of yogis: Hatha Yogi, Raja Yogi, Buddhi Yogi, Sankhya Yogi, Jnana Yogi, Bhakti Yogi, Karma Yogi, Kriya Yogi, Sahaj Yogi, and so on. My friend who had asked the question nodded and said, all right, it's a lot of new information for me. Rather, it's torrential flood of new knowledge, but I kind of get it, and I can see why the question itself may not be the best question. It uses, for one, concepts and frameworks that are very different than those used in the Indian tradition. And secondly, the question has several assumptions which I can actually see do not hold on a closer scrutiny. I grant you that, she said. But she added, there is no escape for you. You can't run away from the answer. You have taken so much of our time. You have to tell us what Hindus believe in. For God's sake, keep it simple and just answer for us whether you believe in one God or many gods, or both one and many, or whatever you believe in. Honestly, there was no escape for me. Some other friends who were there laughed and nodded, supporting her. One of them said to me, hey, before we call it a day, give us something positive that we can take home. You have deconstructed the question marvelously well, and so much new space has opened up, but don't leave the new space that has emerged vacant and empty. That's not a great feeling to carry home. Fill that space with something positive. All right, then, I said, first of all, I'm really grateful for your deep interest in my tradition and the enormous patience that you guys are showing. Also, thank you for bringing me back to the original question. I said I empathize. While the question is problematic in so many ways, for someone who comes from a different tradition, it may offer, nevertheless, a good starting point to learn about Hindu Dharma. It may also be a good starting point for someone who is a Hindu but might have had colonial or English education and is more accustomed to using these categories. After acknowledging that these categories cannot be applied pell-mell and without some serious reconsideration, we can now start to look at Hindu Dharma through the help of these categories, but only as a starting point, with the understanding that in order to truly understand Hindu Dharma, you will have to make yourself familiar eventually with the dharmic terms, concepts and categories and frameworks. I stated again that I'm not proposing that one cannot try to understand the Hindu tradition at all through the help of these, let's say for the sake of a better term, non-Hindu or the Abrahamic category. All that one has to do is to acknowledge its limitations and specify, for instance, by simply stating understanding Hinduism through the lens of Western theology, or Hinduism in the light of Islamic theology, and so on. This would help us, at least those of us who are genuine and non-dogmatic in our approach to knowledge, to be more aware of the context in which a certain study or analysis is being done and about its strengths and limitations. It will also help avoid the ignorance or arrogance of absolutization or universalization of concepts and terms that may be applicable within a certain theological framework, the Abrahamic tradition, for instance, and not in the other. The Buddhist tradition or the Jaina tradition or even the rationalist, the humanist, the scientific or the materialist traditions for that matter. So let's try to answer the question using these very frameworks. Are Hindus monotheists or polytheists? Do they believe in one god or many gods? Now, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism are monotheistic religions. They believe in one God. Hindus too can be monotheistic in this sense, believing that there is only one God. However, it is important to note that the Christian and Islamic monotheism is not only about believing in one God. There is a very important condition attached to that. In both religions, that one God demands the denial and eventual wiping out of the many gods. In Judaism, the concept of monotheism has leaned more towards introspection and self-absorption, and more as a means to safeguard the social and religious boundaries of their community. Their monotheism is, I would say, more culture-centric rather than conversion-oriented, and therefore needs to be considered differently than the Islamic and Christian monotheism. Now, this denial and active demand by the Christian and Islamic God for the eventual wiping out of the many gods or the one God of others adds another layer to their monotheism, a very problematic layer, one that has led to so much bloodshed, bloodbath in history, and which has not stopped even today. So Hindus can be monotheistic and even deny the existence of many gods, but the similarity stops there at the very beginning. First, the denial of many gods in Hinduism does not axiomatically require the total negation or condemnation or wiping out of the many gods of either other Hindus or of followers of other faiths.